more about the challenges of homelessness and life insecurity here in the Valley. And you guys have been great and submitted some questions already. So we're going to run through those. And if you are watching live, you're welcome to comment on whatever platform you're watching on, and we'll try to get to those questions as well. So let's jump right in with a good one. Matt, what are some of the structural barriers facing our city when we're looking at homelessness?
So structural barriers, the government, I think the government presents a structural barrier. Other structural barriers are, the homeless population is, I think one of the hardest parts for me when I go communicate to groups is the homeless population is really unbelievably diverse. It's diverse in terms of the needs and how far people are gone. It's diverse in what type of help can be offered. It's diverse in areas of need. We no longer live in a place where the majority of homeless are located in one geographic area. They're actually very much spread out across the city. One of the barriers are simply the policies behind our state that create the perfect recipe for creating a homeless crisis. To give you an example of a barrier, right? A structural barrier. So this past week, we had an individual staying on the street outside of our facility, which if you've been to our facility, you know that we keep our street our side of the street is very, very clean. We do that for a number of reasons, but one is safety. We have women and children come up all the time, and we can't have it where there's tents and camps and all these types of things because that would be a barrier for them to come in. So we maintain a safe and clean environment. It's also our way to help out the neighbors. So we have an individual who's staying down the street. He comes, he walks into our gate and gets right off the bat attempts to stab one of our officers, one of our security people in security detail. He is unsuccessful because our people are trained. They throw him down to the ground. Police come. He gets taken away, but not arrested. The next day, he comes back. He's harassing a mother and child outside our facility. Security approaches them. He tries to attack them with a steel plate. We again take him down. Police come. On the way down, we accidentally injure him, and trying to take him down so he won't hurt our people. And he's never arrested. Why? Because there's no victim. He didn't actually stab somebody. He just almost did. And this is a problem because he is a perfect candidate to be 5150, to be put into a mental place that he cannot leave, like a mental institution, because he is mentally ill and needs help. Yet the way that our system is set up right now is that he would go into jail, even if he did hit somebody, he would go into jail. He'd be released within 24 hours back on the street. And we have this broken mental health system that acts as a barrier to this person actually getting help. Being arrested would be the best thing for this guy, to be helped, not imprisoned, but helped. And so there's these things like this, like in as much as people talk about what a shelter looks like, the biggest barrier are the policies that have been set up by our government that really facilitate homelessness in our state.
You had mentioned when you and I were talking a couple of weeks ago that there were some policy changes statewide that really increased the number of homelessness. Can you share more about what those are and why they're posing such a challenge?
Sure. So up until 2014, actually, generally across the nation, we were seeing decreases in homelessness. And there was two things that happened, because since 2014, homelessness across the United States has generally increased, although there are pockets, are certain cities that are doing better than others, but generally it's gone up. And then in California, it has gone up like crazy. So I always say if California was a stock in homelessness, it would be Tesla, because it is going through the roof, right? It's going, half of the country's homelessness are located in one single state.
Wow.
And why is that? What happened in 2014? Well, there's a couple things that happened. One, the federal policy became what's called housing first, which means that all dollars went to directly providing housing people without any requirement for services. Now, I'm not against housing first in totality. I'm just against any policy that says this is the only policy. I see every single day hundreds of people that have the deepest levels of trauma, yet the policy from the government is let's just put these people into housing, and then that's the measurable. And so what's happened is that we have a system that just places people, that changes their roof and leaves them in their addictions, that leaves them in their trauma, that leaves them with their mental illness, leaves them being bad parents, leaves them with their economic problems. And so it is the worst pyramid scheme that you could think of, because it in no way can support itself. The average publicly supported housing unit in California costs $500,000 a piece. In order to house the 150,000 homeless that we have just on the street, it would take us $60 or $70 billion at a one-time shot, not counting the year-to-year increases or the year-to-year maintenance of those. Mm-hmm. The other thing, which to me is, a lot of people, when you talk about homelessness, you talk about, well, Reagan shut the mental institutions in the 80s, which a lot of people attribute to a problem. And I would agree. I think that although not having mental institutions is a problem, but I think that in 20 years, we're going to look back on Prop 47 and say that this was equal to, if this was equal to, if didn't surpass the damage of what happened in the 80s. Prop 47 decriminalized many drug crimes. It's essentially legal now to carry drugs that we used to arrest people for and put them in jail. But more importantly, it wasn't putting them in jail. It was requiring them to go to treatment programs. That we had so much dollars that were invested in treatment programs. And you can go talk to the sheriffs. You can go talk to the police, and you can ask them. There are so many stories that I have heard where people thank God that their kid was arrested, because that is what forced them to have to go into a treatment facility in order to get clean. It saved their life. So what's happened is that we made it so that police officers can no longer intervene when someone has drugs at a time when the most dangerous drug of all time has been created for the cheapest possible price. And so as much as people talk about the mental illness, we have what is a far bigger issue than mental illness is drug-induced psychosis, which is people are using a really, really, really bad drug in meth. It is scrambling their brains. And at a certain point, after a shorter period of time than you might think, they no longer have the capacity to participate in their own forward progress. And so I believe in 20 years, we're going to look back and say this Prop 47 thing, and I know it's a political thing, and so I should qualify this as saying I am not trying to get into whether or not Prop 47 on the whole was negative or harmful. I will speak to the issue of what it has done to drugs and homelessness, and it was 110% added to the drug problem. And it is clear when it was passed in 2014 and our numbers of homelessness skyrocketed in comparison to every other state in the nation, that it was directly attributed to that. When I actually go back and so I get to visit homeless shelters across the United States, and I was sitting with a guy in Ohio, and I was sitting in his cafeteria, and he was, we were looking around. I was looking around. I'm like, is this representative of your homeless population? And he said, yeah. And he said, why do you ask? And I was looking around, I'm like, I just don't see that guy that we see all the time everywhere, which is that he is totally strung out. He looks like a cast member from The Walking Dead. And I didn't see him. And I'm like, why, I don't see that guy. So like, we have something different here. He's like, oh yeah, you're from the West Coast, and it was like this thing that like, because we had so many more drugs, the actual nature of some of the homeless population were so much worse than what somebody in another state was experiencing, who had also visited a bunch of shelters. So that Prop 47, those things, I can't overstate how much that is damaging and creating homelessness in California.
That's so interesting. Somebody asked during the live chats piece if the cost of housing was affecting homelessness. Cost of housing isn't helping, that's for sure. But I would also say why I don't think it is as high a variable. It is a big problem, right? I mean, like the affordable housing thing is like crazy. Like, so California makes housing super expensive. Then in order to solve this problem, we say, let's build affordable housing. But then they make affordable housing, because of the regulations attached to it, they make it cost $500,000 per door. And we're just never, ever, ever going to build enough housing. So it's a problem. But I would also say this, why I think it is a factor, not the factors, because was housing cheap in 2014?
was an apartment in LA. Could somebody living on minimum wage in LA afford housing? Could they do that in San Francisco? Could they do that in Sacramento? Maybe Fresno. Maybe Fresno. But the rest of the state all had, in comparison, very high housing prices. Santa Barbara's median in price was still $1 million. And so I don't think that we have seen housing really be at a level that really is truly affordable, like it is in Toledo, Ohio, where you can actually go buy a house for $40,000 right now. So I don't look at that as it doesn't help. I don't think it's a factor that is it does hurt, but I don't think it's the factor. Same thing with minimum wage. As minimum wage has increased, some people said, "Oh, we need to pay people higher wages." Well, you would think that when we see an increase in minimum wages, and believe me, I am all about trying to pay people more. Like I believe in internally, like I tell my staff all the time, like we have to get people to $19 an hour. Like it's kind of known in my organization, like that is our goal with people that we serve. And but you also, when you look back in 2014 and you see the minimum wage increasing, you don't see a corresponding decrease in homelessness. And that's the crazy thing about California. As wages increase, homelessness also increases. As cost of housing increases, so does homelessness. As government spending increases substantially, so does homelessness. So it is something that it should be of a deep concern to every Californian, because I don't think that I don't mean to be political. I actually don't fault them at all, because I just don't think they know. But I don't see those factors. They don't help, but I don't think they're as big as some other factors that are at play.
That's so interesting. Somebody had asked what our city is doing to help the homeless population, whether that's through local programs or statewide programs. What kind of government support is there to this issue?
So before this, I've been the CEO of the Fresno Mission for just over 2 years, actually. That's about 2 years and 3 days. And before that, I was an attorney. I was a partner in a big law firm here in town. And, I always prided myself in giving, being direct with my clients. And if my client came up with a problem, I would want to be respectful, but also direct, because saying, shading the truth, sugarcoating the truth never helped anybody.
So you have something hard to tell us.
Yeah, well, I do. And I always say, if Fresno was my client, if California was my client, if any of the politicians making policy decisions were my client, I would tell them that they are in substantial trouble, that the current status quo has absolutely no hope of solving the current problem, that the rules are set up against them, and that they need changes. If they expect substantial changes, they have to make substantial DNA changes. So our city has, in the last year, spent more money than it has ever spent in homelessness. We also saw the single largest year increase in homelessness that we ever had. In the same year, for the first time, that there was other shelters open up besides the Fresno Mission. Like for a long time, we were basically just it. And there was a few smaller ones. Basically, we were by and large it when it came to, we were still the only 365-day, 24-hour-a-day place that was open. And this last year, the city opened up a few others. And yet, it was our highest year by 2,000 people. We saw more people this past year, in the same year that the city and the county opened up more shelters than ever before by a huge margin. So right now, the city, what they're trying to do is basically what I think that they should do, which is try and open up more available bed and housing type units. There are certain things that the government can do and it can't do. I think that I believe we are so far behind the eight ball as a state and as a community that anything is, just about anything is good as something in a positive direction. Unfortunately, because of the limitations placed on them, there's only so much they can do. There's only so much effectiveness that they can have. But I do think that there's been a much better coordination. But I do think, though, that they're far behind when it comes to where innovation is at and where things are happening. But I do appreciate the hard work and the effort that's being put into it. I do like seeing that, they're trying to give her some hotels and things like that, which is not a negative thing. Do I think it's the thing that's going to solve it? Absolutely, absolutely not. But it's things that we're trying to take steps in the right direction. But right now, what we're really talking about is that, it's the parable, right? We have the beach full of starfish, right? And there's a kid and he's throwing starfish out into the ocean. And the old man comes up and says, "Why are you wasting your time?" He says, "That doesn't matter." And the kid picks up and throws a starfish and he says, "Well, not to that one." And really right now, we're talking about saving starfish. We're not talking about saving the beach. And so that's something that I think all Fresnans, all Californians need to understand, because I believe, and I am starting to be more vocal about this, is that we need substantial DNA shifting changes at the state level in order for really to make some differences.
What are those kinds of shifts that you think need to take place?
So I think that we need to go away from the one-trick pony housing first model and to not necessarily just ditch it altogether, but we need things that actually give people a better future than just the housing first model can. I'll give you an example. So I will be the first to say that our solution is not the solution for every single homeless person. Mm-hmm. I believe in diversity. Now, but I will say this. For the people that come through my program, 84% don't go back on public assistance. They make an average of $16 an hour, and we have an 80% success rate of those that come through. Now it takes an average of about $30,000 for each of our people to get through. But so if you have 10 people that come to my program, and let's say 4 of them make it through, right? Because addiction is hard, right? That means that it would cost $120,000 to get those 4 through. But those 4 that get through, there's an 84% chance that they will not be on the taxpayer's dime for the rest of their lives. Yet under the government's program, to house one of those would be $500,000. And if you do that, the likelihood is that they will never, ever get off public assistance ever again. And so while I'm not saying not to build those public housing units, I'm also not saying that can't be the only solution that we fund. We at the Fresno Mission, the other reason, as I believe, is because we believe at the Fresno Mission that God has a purpose for every individual, and that what we deal with is trauma and brokenness that is so much deeper than you can possibly imagine. Let me just give you a story. So I met a man named Nico. He was homeless. He was homeless. Why was he homeless? Was homelessness his problem? Well, Nico had been in 25 different foster homes, and he was homeless. Now, if we just gave him a roof, "Hey, Nico, we got you an apartment," does that solve the fact that he had suffered tremendous abuse, neglect, that his growth had been stunted as a person developmentally by the 25 different foster homes that he had been in, where he had suffered abuse? He didn't receive the normal things that a kid receive, so his brain stops functioning at a certain age. I was with Nico last week, and he just got a promotion to the manager of the Starbucks downtown. And so that is something that's really hard, I think, for the government to do. But that's also why I don't think that we can be a one-trick pony and say, well, we should just push people into housing. No, the stories of trauma, the stories of the level of trauma that people suffer is so much deeper than we possibly think. And we see this all the time, is that when you give somebody a positive relationship, when you give them friendship, and then you start to unwind some of these things that have happened to them, and then give them the benefit of the single most important thing that we can, which is time, the benefit of time, that you start to unwind those things. And I would say to anybody, if your kid came to you and he was wrecked with an addiction, or he was just struggling in life and he was depressed and doing bad things, would you say, "Son, you have 90 days and then we're going to get you an apartment and you're going to be good"? You would never say that to your kid. You'd be like, "Hey, I need to help you over the long haul here." And we have a system that's like, "Hey, we're going to give you 90 days and then we're going to get you an apartment and then we're going to wave goodbye, but you can come back anytime you want, but we're going to wave goodbye." And is very much what our system is like. And so at the statewide level, I would change it so that we can have spaces that give people time, that allow them, that encourage them, that require them to participate in their own forward progress. I would change, the other thing I would do is I would change the definitions for for mental health. So right now, we cannot commit somebody, even that gentleman who was trying to stab us, right? We can't commit somebody to a mental health institution or force them to take their meds unless they're a danger to themselves or danger to others. Now, clearly there's some big gaps there. But my problem is that there's so many people who aren't in either one of those categories, necessarily how it's defined, that can fit. You know, there was a gentleman who used to sleep in the bank, in the river bottom outside my law firm, right? I used to have an office that overlooked the river. It was really nice. I don't have that anymore. And his name was Nathaniel. Nathaniel thought that he was an Olympic gold medalist and that his gold medals had been bonded to his bones on his body. He was probably to this day the dirtiest homeless person I've ever encountered. And we used to have lunch together on occasion over by my office. You know, Nathaniel wasn't a danger to himself. And he wasn't harming me. Yet Nathaniel had deep, deep mental illness issues. But there's nothing that we can do. And Nathaniel will never make a rational decision to come inside and get help. No person handing him $1 on the corner, no person giving him a meal will ever do that. What Nathaniel needs is a parent to come in his life and say, Nathaniel, there's things beyond your mental capacity. We need to help you. And it is inhumane for us not to do so. But California is not set up like that. The other thing we have to understand what our drug policy is doing. I don't want to see a bunch of people in prison, but are there people that are dying and increasingly measured because we have Prop 47? Absolutely. 100%. People are dying more so than when there was before. Because why? We have more people who are dying from drugs. They're dying from the street. Their lives are being taken from them. And whether or not they actually don't have a breath in their lung anymore, or they've been walking on the street for 5 years on meth and completely gone, they would died a long time ago. And that is cruel to me. And if you talk to the police and you talk to the sheriffs who I deal with, they're not inhumane. Now, I know police is a hot button issue right now. I'm not trying to delve into that. But I will say that in talking to the people that I do speak with who do deal in the homelessness, is that they would tell you that one of the things they lament the most about Prop 47 is that they can no longer take that guy who desperately needs help and not send him to prison, send him to a program. And that can't happen anymore. And that to me is very tragic.
That's so insightful and helpful from my perspective of somebody who cares deeply for the humanity of every person I see on the street, but has no idea what to do or what impact some of the laws that we've passed have made. So thank you so much for sharing that. Shifting gears a little bit, I'd love to hear about how COVID has affected your work and the insecure people in our community.
Yeah, so we keep having to punch back against COVID. So I would say that before COVID started, we were absolutely 100% in crisis mode. So some people may have seen some of the shots from the winter last year. We had so many people that we were over 210% of capacity on average, right? And our capacity, we measure it by how many beds that we have. And so when we say we're over 200%, that means that all of our beds were filled, and then we were putting mattresses on the floor, and then our mattresses on the floor were filled, and then we were giving people sheets to sleep directly on the floor. We had people in all of our overflow all the time, so often that it was incredibly tragic. We had families and children. I mean, I saw so many nights when a child or a mother or father with their children were sleeping on a floor. Because we were so full. We were so unbelievably full. Last year, we broke every record we had in terms of numbers. Like if there's a measurable that we take, whether that's meals or shelter or people in program or getting people out of program or, all those things, we broke every record.
Wow.
And so COVID hit and we had to socially distance, right? We couldn't, have people sleeping in every single nook and cranny anymore. So that changed for us, right? We had to actually limit for the first time. We were the place that never turned you away. And for the first time we had to say, to keep people safe, we actually have to. We're actually being ordered to. And so the way that we do that, the way that we deliver meals, we're a restaurant. And so it's weird that the thing we have to offer is now we're being told we can't. And so we've had to pivot on how we do that, and so we're serving in every week. It's like we're serving in a different way to still try and provide to provide food. But the way we've pivoted is we still provide meals, but we also provide a lot more food out into the community. So we're not the food bank. But we do serve a lot of food, to different people like in the community, to different groups that help feed in the community that help support what we do. But I would say probably the biggest thing for us is that there's been an increase in need for people that have hit rock bottom. We specialize in changing people's lives. That's really where we're at. That's the core of what we want to do. And so when the government provided checks, which I'm not arguing was a good thing or bad thing, the fact of the matter is that for those people who weren't on solid ground, many of them turned to unhealthy things. And then the money ran out. And then they hit rock bottom. And so much of what we do has been responding to that rock bottom, all those people that have now hit rock bottom. And so those have been ways that have changed. The other way that's changed is that we take people who have COVID in all the time. And so we are no stranger to COVID. I would say, fortunately, we haven't had COVID in our facility in some time, but I think that's a testament to what's been happening externally. The homeless population has actually been has actually fared very well in comparison. And so we're one of the triage points when a hospital does get a homeless person in with COVID. And so we take those people in from the hospital because we actually take people in from the hospital regularly. It's like, when a homeless person needs to be discharged and not have any place to go, but they still need follow-up care, or the place we are the respite. It's called respite. So we are the place that they send them. Wow. And so we take COVID patients as well now. And so that's been something. It's always a scary thing, but I think probably the healthiest thing that's been for our organization is actually having to deal with COVID. And what started, we took it the most serious. We had the highest controls. We were the most strict on shelter in place. And then after the shelter in place was lifted, right, and we tried to respond to get back to respond to the community. I mean, to start taking more people in and doing that. We started getting cases. At that time, everyone was so freaked out. We thought COVID, there's going to be bodies in the hallways and all this stuff. And we dealt with it. We saw that while it's serious and we need to be responsible, we also saw that it wasn't quite as scary as it was originally made out to be. And I'm saying it's very serious for certain people, but we also saw that it wasn't a death sentence for every single person. And so that, just dealing with it, allowed us to move forward without living in fear. And that was important because I tell people this all the time. If somebody knocks on my front door or on our door or comes to us, the statistical likelihood that something else on the street will kill them or provide long-term damage is so much higher than COVID. Every person, the woman who was raped, the child who's being abused, the man who's been living on the street with meth, all of those things are far more likely to cause long-term damage or death than COVID. And so we live in that reality. And so by having to deal with COVID, it actually allowed us to move forward in a place where we're still being responsible, but we weren't operating under this cloud of fear, because we were like, look, we have to take people in always. We have to serve them, knowing that we have increased risks. I know that the nurses and, right now I see, our first responders, and I fully support them and everything, right? But I also think to the first responders who are six intakes back in the hospital, deep in the hospital, right? And they have all these protocols in place. And, I'm an administrative officer. I don't come in, I don't come in contact quite as much on a day-to-day basis, but I have staff who are like the people behind when the door opens. And I think to those guys and what they face on a day-in-and-day basis, and they're not behind 16 rows of protocols. They are right there in the face of serving food, of providing need, of being out in the street. And I'm very impressed with them and have a great deal of respect for them for what they do.
Sounds like you guys have gotten to a healthy place, realizing that there's still work to do and doing what you can to stay safe. That's wonderful. I have a couple of quick questions that have come in the last few minutes, and then I want to give you a chance to talk about what comes next with the Fresno mission. First one is why'd you guys take the mission or the rescue out of the name?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I'm always happy to get asked that because I think it's important. Why? When the Fresno Rescue Mission started 70 years ago, it started as a place to welcome people out of the cold, to give them maybe a warm cup of soup and and a bed. But we've had to evolve over time. And rescue, that when you think about helping somebody in our sector, there's relief and there's development. If we were going to go in and there was if there was a natural disaster in a third world country, we would go in as a country and we provide immediate relief aid, right? We would dig wells and provide food. But at some point, the relief turns to development, where you're helping the country get back on their feet again and with investment, right? And that's very similar to how we operate. When somebody comes in, there's certainly relief things, the shelter, food, medical, all those things that somebody deals with, the clothing, all those things that you do with in a relief or rescue type situation. But at some point, once the person makes a decision to transform their lives, we're no longer in a rescue type mode. We're actually in a development type mode. So, like, for example, one of the things that happened last year is we became a site for Fresno City College. So people that are actually with us in program become students at Fresno City College through what they're being taught with us. Now, that's not a rescue thing. That's a development thing. And so when you look up to our future, and I guarantee you this, while we can't go into fully everything that's happening with our future just yet, I guarantee you that when you look at it, you will be blown away, that you will see how much we are about developing people in new ways and doing things that are far more, they're beyond just rescue, because we have to change and adapt to what's happening around us. Mm-hmm. And so part of it was just kind of recognizing, like, we still absolutely do rescue. We still provide the most amount of shelter beds. We still provide the most amount of foods. We still do these things. And yet we're so much about development. And so just removing it was a way for us to say, no, this is our expanded vision for what our future is going to be. And the other reason is that, when somebody, we always say, for a long time, we say, we serve the least, the last, and the lost. You know what? Somebody who's the least, last, and the lost doesn't need to be told? That they're the least, last, and the lost. I never want our name to be a barrier. I remember one mother coming to us, and I was talking to her. She was staying in our shelter, and she was so ashamed. Because she was just like, I'm here. I'm at the rescue mission. And while it wasn't based upon the way that we were treating her, she knew that she had fallen into a homeless situation. She was ashamed. And that to me was something I don't want people facing. And so when you look at the things that we are building, what we'll be doing in the future, it's about that woman, to let her know that she does not have to be ashamed. In fact, one of the things that our staff are required to do is to compliment every person who comes in and to find something about them so they're not ashamed. And so when you say Fresno Rescue Mission, what does a rescue do? It implies that you're in a place of need. And I want people coming to us, I know that they're in need, but I don't want them feeling ashamed. And so I don't think Rescue Mission was a bad thing. I'm not saying that, but we have to evolve for what we're doing in our future. And I guarantee you two things. We will continue to do a substantial amount of rescue, but that woman will not come in and feel ashamed. She will not look at our facilities. She will not look at what we're doing and think of, I have fallen into the rescue mission, or I've fallen into homelessness. She'll think, I'm here, I'm ready to be helped, I'm ready for change. I did the right thing by coming here.
Beautiful. We had a comment come in through James Orr, who is a public defender locally, and he said that it should be possible to have people sentenced to an inpatient program. And I know absolutely nothing about this, so I'm going to connect you two later, just in case you know something you don't. But last question before we get into your kind of long-term vision is really practical. We're driving in the car, we stop at a stoplight, there's somebody panhandling. What would you recommend we do?
So this is a great question, and I'm glad that I get this. This is probably one of, I think, the best questions I get from churches, and one of the ones that I most frequently like to ask people, that I like to talk about. Mm-hmm. The reason is because it's so hard. And I would ask this. I'm hoping that everybody here that I'm talking to has a belief in Jesus, that believes in the saving grace of Jesus, and that believes in the power of the Holy Spirit, that believes that that a life committed to the gospel can be changed. And one of the biggest things about an organization, one of the internal like themes or rallying cries that we have that help guide our narrative is moving things from the transactional to the relational. I want every single thing about our organization to move the transactional to the relational. Why? Is because I said this on the video, so I don't want to necessarily take time repeating myself, but what did God do? He came down and sent his son to be relational with us. And there's people who say absolutely don't give money, absolutely don't have a meal. And I would just say this: what is your personal why? If it ends at giving somebody $1 and it ends at a meal, I would say evaluate your call of the gospel. Because I guarantee you this: if you feel compelled to give that person a meal, God is calling you to give that person something more. He is calling you to try and enter a relationship with him. So if you're giving that guy a meal and you're doing it every few days and you're just, that's it, I'd say, let's rethink that a little bit. But if it's because that you're going to give him something and saying, hey, Frank, I love you, bro. Hey, Frank. And let's pretend that the Holy Spirit is real and that while there is a lot that's difficult, that he can still move through very difficult circumstances. I think back to that story of the friends who dropped their friend on the mat down the through the hole, right? And that guy could not have done that himself. It took somebody intervening in his life to do that. I think of the Good Samaritan. Did the Good Samaritan, did it just end with him giving him a meal or finding him a place? No, if the scripture says he provided enough money so that guy, he could, for his continued growth, I'm messing up the phrase, but his future well-being. It was beyond just the immediate. It was for an extended period of time, so that he would send him off okay. And we have all these examples in the Bible where it took people coming along, people who couldn't do it themselves, to give them long-term growth. And so I would say it's hard for me to say don't do this or do this. Do I have mothers who say, oh, thank you, my son is out there, don't feed his addiction with your $1? I totally get that. I don't personally give money out, but I personally will give food if I'm trying to help somebody, and if that is my goal. But I also know internally, I know if it ends there, God's calling me to something more. And so that's kind of how I want people to approach it. God wants you to move from the transactional to the relational. If you're finding that your ministry, your personal ministry is more transactional in whatever you're doing, I guarantee you that God wants you to be relational, because that's what he did. That's what he did with sending Jesus.
That is a great and very challenging perspective. Thank you. So I don't want to keep you too late tonight, but I'd love to hear what comes next for the Fresno mission. I've heard rumors of some big plans, and I think we'd be blessed to hear how you are serving our community.
Sure. So I would say the biggest plan, which we're not very vocal about, but we have a couple big things that we're working on. So one I can't just talk about to yet, not to be secretive at all. Just it's still very much like in the big work, the big works. And partially just because we have to fight with anything we do, we have to fight politically with to get it done. And there's always people saying not in my backyard. So we always have to be cautious with that. And fortunately, we have a big God, and I just kind of follow where he's leading and know that he fights my battles for me. But one of the next thing that I'm most heavy in the process of doing is we are opening up a new campus at the former site of the Sierra Hospital at Dakota and 41. It's a 9-acre, 7-building campus. We are building what I believe will be the best front door for homelessness that in the state of California, and the most unique service place in the state of California. Fresno is 17.48 miles from its east to west, and it's 16.44 miles from north to south. And where those 2 points intersect is actually at this property. So we're calling it City Center. And City Center is going to be a shared campus focusing on people's barriers, burdens, and beginnings who are struggling with life insecurities related to homelessness, poverty, addiction, trauma, lack of community, and no connection with God. And what I mean by that, when I say shared campus, meaning one of the things we recognize that while we do certain things very, very well, we don't do everything the best. And it's okay to say that. But while what we're doing is we're saying, hey, we're building this campus, and we're doing it for more than just the Fresno mission. We're actually extending it so there will be a number of organizations that do all sorts of different things, co-located on a common campus, working together to create really the most comprehensive array of services in a place that I will guarantee you will look more like a Bitwise building than it will look like a hospital, that focus on people's barriers, burdens, and beginnings. And so it's a very exciting project. You'll certainly hear more about it in the coming months after the first of the year. But that to us is going to be a game changer for ministry for us, very much so. When you think about how we are a faith-based organization. We're about the gospel, and churches are built in such a way where they have an auditorium and classrooms, and their architecture kind of facilitates what their role is, which is preaching and teaching. And yet the goal of the church is to serve the poor. It is to serve those who are the least, last, and lost. But churches aren't designed that way. This will be the church designed to meet those needs. If the church was going to be designed to meet those needs, this is what it would look like. And so when that mom comes in with her, but I guarantee this, when that mom comes in with her child, she's not going to feel ashamed. She's going to walk in, and the first thing that she's going to see is the best coffee shop, a coffee shop by one of the best coffee shops in our city. And I won't say the name just yet, but I guarantee you probably all go there. That as opposed to waiting rooms and desks, you're walking into something that looks more like a giant restaurant. That serves in a different way, that looks differently. And so it's going to be a really spectacular place.
That's wonderful. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us tonight and for all that you're doing to labor on behalf of the Life Insecure here in our community. I'll put in a little plug for you because I know that you're donor funded and volunteer powered. So we'll put a link to your website if you guys feel a passion for this ministry and want to support either financially or find volunteer opportunities or needs of things that need donating. We'll put that link on there and would love to connect you to this good work. But Matt, thanks so much for being with us tonight, and I have loved learning more about your ministry. Thanks.
Thank you very much.